I am Basavdatta Jana. I am your moderator for this session under the theme Constitution, Welfare and Development. This session will focus on social and economic justice, which are fundamental principles that underscore the pursuit of fairness, equality, and inclusivity in societies. Without further ado, I would like to call upon the stage our esteemed chair, Shri Salman Khurshid, and our panelists, Professor S. Madheswaran, Shri Nikhil De, Ms. Beena Palikal. I would kindly request everyone present here to please settle down, as we would like to start the session right away. I would kindly ask everyone kindly to please settle down, as we would like to start the session right away. Without further ado, I would like to take a few moments to introduce our Honorable Chair and speakers for this session. Shri Salman Khurshid, Senior Advocate, Distinguished Indian Politician, and former Cabinet Minister of the Ministry of External Affairs. Professor S. Madheswaran, Professor and Head of the Center for Economic Studies and Policy, and also former director at the Institute for Social and Economic Change in Bangalore. He also served as an advisor to the Government of Karnataka on planning, program monitoring, and statistics. Shri Nikhil De, social activist and co-founder of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sanghatan. He stands as a stalwart in Indian social activism, dedicating his life to the advocacy of human rights at the grassroots movements. Ms. Beena Palikal, General Secretary of National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights. She specializes in advocating for Dalit economic rights, particularly focusing on empowering Dalit women. Now, I would like to hand over to the chair to start the session. So,
thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had some very, very good sessions throughout the day. But I do believe in a unique sort of way, this session has both the talent and the intent to be at the cutting edge of the discussions that have centered around our constitutional commitment. And the core of our constitution, explicitly provided in our preamble, is for justice, both social and economic. And we do realize what a major challenge that is in a democracy where not only are there so many plural interests, but there are so many different levels of economic existence, and the aspiration of an egalitarian society, which has been the major plank of elected governments since independence. They may not have achieved the extent to which egalitarian was an aspiration, but they moved regularly, steadily towards that aspiration, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. But the challenges remain, and we know the challenges are very deep. If we go by anything like the protest movements of the important segments of our society, whether it comes from the farmers, it comes from the Dalits and the Shoshits, it comes from students, it comes from the labor movement, it comes from the unemployed youth, etc. Those challenges remain. And they are encapsulated in the theme that we are to discuss now for the next hour and a half. So please attend to this as a very, very important task of nation building and of justice as we understand justice amongst the people of our country. And so we would start this with presentations and propositions placed by the honorable members of the panel, and then we'll take questions from you so that discussion can go to some meaningful conclusion. So in the spirit of gender justice, if I may ask our colleague here, Beena ji, to speak not only of those who belong to the most exploited caste community conglomeration of people of India, but also amongst them particularly of the women who in any community at any level are the worst sufferers of injustice. So may I ask her to begin this discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm just being put on the spot, but I'll try to...
We're giving you a first chance, and otherwise you complain you don't get a first chance.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to stress on 4 important areas of work that I think is very critical for the empowerment and the emancipation of the Dalit community, specifically looking at intersectionality and looking at women within. Okay. So for the longest time, I think I have heard schemes and programs. For example, when you think of women and when you're talking about, what can you support women in entrepreneurship? And the number one thing that I often hear is sewing machines, give her sewing machines or let her make baskets. And I've been hearing this since so many years that I've come to this work, and probably even before that. While I don't think that this is not a strategy that we must not use, I mean, there might be women who are interested in doing that, and so be it, and I think we should support it. But we've come to a point in the history of this country since independence where we have seen that we've even gone to the moon, and somebody said we are even going to the sun, or any other planets in the space that we are planning to conquer. But we are still stuck in this basic thing of sewing machine and basket making. Today I want to challenge all of us that can we look beyond that? Can we look a little beyond this and see what are the multi-pronged strategies that we can actually use for the emancipation and empowerment of the Dalit. Specifically, I'll stick to the Dalit community because that's where I work. And what can be the models of economic development? It was Indira Gandhi ji who started the tribal sub-plan in 1974, which was a plan. We have it in Rajasthan now, and we have it in Uttarakhand, Andhra, and Telangana. It's a very powerful policy. And that's why many times when I'm arguing with many economists and people who think that universalization is the best thing. You have a universal policy, everybody gets it, everybody is able to access this because it's universal. But the term universalization is a very beautiful term. But actually when you go to the ground, which we saw, for example, during the vaccine campaign that the country was doing, that many people in the far-off regions, in the mountains, people who were disabled, people who didn't know that such a vaccine campaign was going on, it was a universal program. But there were many people who were not able to access vaccine because of these different intersectionalities, whether they were disabled, whether they were people, the older people who couldn't travel to the clinics. We saw many cases like that. But one particular case that I'd like to mention in one of our studies, where they suddenly went on lockdown and all the colleges went online, and they said that, classes are through smartphones and computers. Nobody ever thought that how many people, how many families have smartphones, or how many people have access to data, forget smartphones, even if they have one smartphone or one computer in the house, is there access to data? And nobody thought that we have to make data accessible for people. So in a house where there was one smartphone, in a small Dalit hamlet somewhere in, in Bihar, for example, couldn't give that smartphone to the girl, so they gave it to the boy so that he could use it, because for them, boys would go on and studies, girls would go on and get married. And so there itself you can see how it worked, that when they had a choice of who would get that education, it was always the the boy child who would get it. The other example I'd give is, for many years we have seen migration for jobs, climate-induced migration, where people move from, flood-prone areas, cyclone-prone areas, to more cities like Bombay, Pune, Delhi, etc. So we tried this experiment where we gave people who had land, and they were mostly Adivasi communities, the mango plantation, where we put it in the name of the woman. And the woman started this. And when she started this, at first there was so much of, many people were like, why are you doing this in the woman's name? This will not work. There was a lot of resistance. But then slowly she took that as a challenge, and she started also employing, including her husband and others, through the Manrega program. So there was a convergence of this program of, this was under the horticulture scheme and the Manrega program. She started converging this, and ultimately the men who were migrating in that particular small village stopped migrating, because they also got jobs, and they also then went on to have their own business of selling mangoes to the free market. So the other thing I'd like to say, that when we're thinking more about that in the next part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you saw the beginning of a vast subject. I hope that in the time that's left, we'll be able to come back to some of the important issues that are flagged. Nikhil Desi, as an activist and a person with great experience on the ground, I think if we could have a few words from you.
Yeah. So about 10 minutes? Yeah, so thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to really congratulate the Government of Karnataka for holding a conference, a national or maybe international conference, on the Constitution as a central theme. I think that's an extremely important thing. Today we talk about narratives, and unfortunately we are being completely controlled by narratives that are pushing us down in a different direction and in a reactive fashion. I think the Constitution is an opportunity for us to not only hang on to, but define a narrative in the way that we can be proactive while holding to account those who are in power nationally, who are undermining everything. And in that narrative, I think this combination of Constitution and national unity is extremely important, because to me, being against the Constitution and the idea and conception of an Hindu Rashtra is against the Constitution is to be anti-national. For all of us who have been called anti-national so many times, in so many ways, it is unbelievable that completely brazenly one ruling party goes around with an anti-national message, an anti-national narrative, an anti-national agenda, and gets away with it. So I think it is extremely important that today we are in a forum where there are political parties, where there are social activists, where there are citizens. It is extremely important that we look at that larger framework, because without the Constitution, even though many of our own colleagues say that it is being eaten up from within, that is the strongest thing we have to hang on to. And it's something that is an unfinished agenda in a positive sense. And actually the little that is done has been done, and that was done during the national movement to make this country what it is. to make the idea of this country what it is being completely undermined as we watch in front of us. So there is nothing, I think, more important than this, to equate the two, that if we want national unity, we must have the Constitution in letter and spirit. And if, contrary to that, we undermine the Constitution, we are undermining national unity. The second point, I think, is to go back to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and in this session, which actually defines this session to me. Because at the time, those are famous lines, everyone in this room must know it fully, but it is worth coming back to them, that our biggest challenge as we face our new constitution is that we will have political equality of one person, one vote, but we will have immense social inequality and immense economic inequality. This session deals with that issue of social and economic justice, and obviously there can be no justice without equality. So, to my mind, this session is something to go back to fundamentals, again, of the conference as a whole, to go back to fundamentals of this session, which is that if we continue to have greater and greater economic inequality, which we are having, which we have seen through COVID years, which we have seen through the Oxfam inequality reports, which we have seen through our lives, of the affluent getting more and more, one set of corporates getting more and more, I mean, it is not just conspicuously affluent, but it is at the cost literally of everyone else, and so therefore that growth rate really does not matter, because who is it going to is what matters. And similarly, social inequality is only lip service being paid and one community being targeted. There is no doubt about it, and the targeting of that one single community, deliberate targeting of the single community, undermines our social fabric in fundamental ways. We are actually undermining India. We are undermining Bharat. We are undermining everything that we stand for with this nature of targeting. And therefore, this idea of social and economic equality and the idea of the Constitution and national unity is the idea of the fraternity in our Constitution, which says that if you ensure the dignity of every individual, only then will you have the unity and integrity of the nation. And therefore it is dignity of Dalits. Therefore it is dignity of women. Therefore it is dignity of minority communities. Therefore it is dignity of nomadic communities. Therefore it is dignity of children, of every kind of marginalized community individually. It is not until we have that idea of fraternity in letter and spirit that we can really get it. I don't want to take long, and I want to say only one more thing, and then if there are discussions, obviously I'll speak, is that we are now facing an election, a national election. We cannot have this kind of discussion just in the air. We have to be able to see how this agenda can actually be furthered. And there is a government that is doing it. That government can, and there is an opportunity through practice to actually show how things can be done. It is also through practice to show the contrast between what a government that will work for social and economic justice and a government that will only pay lip service for being able to try and get votes or garner votes, or to show some completely symbolic representation. We have to be able to show it, and from our experience, and I think I would like to say that there are certain kinds of things that were done in the state of Rajasthan that I'd like to bring it forth, where, and I know that various people, there are various conversations going on about manifestos, that these have been laws that I will only mention laws. The Congress party has talked about guarantees, that discourse is being taken away. to the guarantee of one person, and just as a language of putting himself further and further. The UPA government, in which many of the people in the India Alliance who are here brought in a series of rights-based legislations. And I think the furtherance of the constitutional framework came from the unfinished agenda of our directive principles of state policy. If we look at that, again, it was a very, very important part of our constitution. We did not do it until those UPA years. And in those UPA years, whether it's right to information, whether it's employment guarantee, whether it's Forest Rights Act, whether it's right to food, whether it's right to education, social security, street vendors, there are n number of legislations that came in that are the most significant thing for people since independence that happened. But we have a political framework that neither claims it nor takes it forward. That's a tragedy. And we cannot we cannot have this session either by saying that we will only talk about these things and not actually take them to the people as the real constitutional agenda, as the real agenda of social and economic justice, as the real agenda of empowering people and standing behind them. And I will say very briefly, there are 4 laws I will mention from Rajasthan that came forward, and those 4 laws, in a sense, take that agenda of UPA forward. The first was the right to health. The right to health law was enacted with a lot of opposition. But again, whether we talk of what Beena talked about, that the most marginalized, it is only when you give equal access to health to all that you will find that Dalits and Adivasis will also get access to health, free and equal access to health, and nothing could have shown us more than COVID. A second law actually has 3 laws within it. The minimum guaranteed income law, where it said that pensions, and look at the central government social security pension, it's still 200 and 300 rupees. That made a minimum pension of 1,000 rupees, legislated into law for the first time, with a 15% increment per year. And the BJP government has been forced to implement that 15% increment this year. That's the advantage of a rights-based law, that is my right, and to take it forward. In that law was for those who can work in Narega 25 days extra as a legal guarantee. And for the first time, an urban employment guarantee law, which gave 125 days work to urban workers as a legal guarantee. So that's 3 laws actually in one, but the minimum guaranteed income. Work for those who can, pensions for those who cannot go to work. The third, and there are 1 crore pension people who are getting pension. Will that discourse be taken to the people as something that a government has done? The third law is something that Beena mentioned, which was the Scheduled Caste Plan and Scheduled Tribe Sub-Plan law, which says that spend हमारी जितनी संख्या भारी, हमारी उतनी भागीदारी. Simple, you don't need more money. Just do justice in the money you have in your budget. That's what we need. We don't need additional money. We don't need to fight for that. As much as our population is, give us that. It is so powerful an idea. It's a law, but it needs to be implemented, needs to be taken forward. And a 4th law, which again doesn't need money from the state, and which the government of Karnataka has promised, which is the gig workers law. New labor relationships, where again marginalized communities will suffer the most, is that you are not a worker, but we will take profits from you. The gig workers law just dealt with social security. We need to get regulation across the board. It deals with the corporate sector. It needs to come all across, but these are only 4 examples. Within the directive principles, we should have a constitutional agenda to put it into place, to make sure that there is more equality, less inequality at every stage, social and economic. And the last thing I'd like to say is that these are 2 colleagues who said I should say it. that there are symbols that we need to use. Budget, where is the budget for doing all this for the poor? And we use, and Salman Khurshid ji would know this, we use the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. We should promise to pass a Human Responsibility and Budget Management Act. Who cares about fiscal responsibility if we don't do something for human beings? It cannot only be for one set of people. We should pass that as our framework for our budget. And something else a colleague said, which is really two models of development. One is when those tunnels in Uttarakhand collapsed. That is modern India, we see it. They collapsed because we want from one dham to the other dham, these fancy highways to go. And we are doing it through places and people where we are causing immense environmental damage, and that's a symbol. And finally, who came to rescue them? The rat hole miners of Meghalaya, who are considered illegal, who do that for a living, and who did it out of humanity without any fancy equipment. And that's where we need to understand who our real future is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those are very provocative, far-reaching ideas, and would obviously require a great deal of attention and sincerity to take forward. So, Professor Sabab, why don't you try to weave some of these thoughts together and then and see what you could suggest as being the way ahead, path ahead. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Respected Chairman and other dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. At the outset, I thank the Government of Karnataka and my ISAC team, Professor Thorat, and my colleague, Professor Krishnaraj, for the opportunity to say some few words about in this convention, Constitution and National Unity Convention. Of course, my presentation basically based on the recent book written by me and Professor Thorat on settled caste in the Indian labor market, employment discrimination, and its impact on poverty. Of course, I would like to connect to this constitution, whatever the book which we have written. Of course, all of you know that's Article 14, Article 15, Article 16, what it extends the right of equality of opportunity of employment or appointment under the state. And as a researcher, as an economics professor, of course, I'm specialized in econometrics. I do measure a lot of things, measuring poverty, measuring employment discrimination, measuring wage discrimination, and it relates to public policy. When I talk about the inequality nowadays in the Indian context, over the period of time, we, the economists, we talk about the inequality of outcome. But very few people, they talk about inequality of opportunity. Now, all of us know that the inequality of outcome and the inequality of opportunity are two sides of the same coin. So when we talk about the policies and programs, I think we have to make use of both the results from inequality of outcome and inequality of opportunity. We should not think of the one side. Keeping this in view, the equal employment opportunity law and policies have made some progress in promoting diversity, inclusion, and equity in the workplace. But the Constitution of India guarantees equal rights to all citizens and prohibits discrimination on the basis of caste, religion, and gender. The government has established several institutions to promote and monitor equal employment opportunity. However, most of the private sector and the companies still face challenges in implementing this equal opportunity law policies and practices, such as resistance to change, lack of awareness, unconscious bias, limited diversity in hiring, and lack of accountability and external factor. Because every topic is a broad topic, which I don't want to take much time. Because of paucity of time, I just wanted to say a few words about the results of the book, what we have written, and connect to the Constitution and the national unity. Of course, Madam was chairing last session, what I could make out from the session, last session, is that the two policy directions have emerged in India. One is economic empowerment, another is equal opportunity. But providing equal opportunity through instruments like reservation, there is a considerable disagreement among the private sector leaders. And reservation policy is confined to the tiny government sector, and as Madam was saying, that the vast private sector remained outside the purview of the reservation policy. Whereas if you look at the other country, Netherlands, USA, even our neighboring country, Malaysia, there are several examples. The other countries, the affirmative action policy has been put into practice both for public and private sector. Of course, our chairman must be knowing in 2004, sir, there was a views have been expressed both in favor and against the reservation in the private sector. The Employers Association have particularly opposed this view. I think you know that, and you are the minister at that time. And keeping this as a background, as an economic student, I just wanted to give a kind of a highlight from economics, whatever the discipline which I have learned. And there are some dozens of Nobel Prize winners. I can name Becker, Yarrow, Phelps, Akerlof, and Xenatos, the dozens of Nobel Prize winners, they have written theory of discrimination. And most of this theory of discrimination, what they have written, and the insights, I don't want to talk many things. There are 4 insights I want to derive out of from these dozens of Nobel Prize winners. They have written the theory of discrimination. The first point is economic discrimination, particularly market discrimination, do hamper economic growth. It's all based on empirical exercise. And second is it brings unequal income distribution and deprivation for the discriminated group. And the third evidence what they had given is that it will create potential situation for intergroup conflict. And the fourth, they said very clearly, we talk about investment in human capital. So discrimination also affects productivity by reducing the magnitude of investment in human capital by the discriminated group and return on this investment. So while drawing the insights from this theoretical insights from the Western theory, these are all Western writers and the Nobel Prize winners. They have written the theory of discrimination. Of course, the first Nobel Prize winner is Darius Becker. He was stating that taste for discrimination, T-A-S-T, taste for discrimination. This is a word, still it prevails in India, which he has written long back in 1970. There is a taste for discrimination. And by looking at that, several questions in our society, it comes even to our government. What are the 3 questions which I want to put forward, and I want to give some empirical evidence? I will take some another 2, 3, 5, 4 minutes, and I will complete, sir. The 3 question is important. Why is the government in developed and developing countries concerned about economic discrimination? Second question is discrimination only an equity issue, or it also involves economic cost to the society? And third, are the costs it imposes on the society more social and political than economic? So, given this question, of course, we should not forget about our Dr. Ambedkar. We have seen as an economist the close look at the Western theories and theory of discrimination. When I come to our Indian context, we should not forget about Dr. Ambedkar's thought on discrimination. Of course, I don't want to say many things, because most of the audience, you know Dr. Ambedkar's writing. If we close look at Dr. Ambedkar's memorandum, South Borough Committee, revision of Indian Act 1919, and the second attempt was made to revise Government of India Act during 1930-31, and Simon Commission in May 1928. And final statement came in 1947, the state and minority. What are their rights and how to secure them in the Constitution of Free India? At the time of framing Indian Constitution, that has come into the mind of Dr. Ambedkar. And he has suggested many remedies. Of course, I don't want to go to all the remedies, what he has suggested, all of you know that. Which the kind of a remedy, when you talk about the legal safeguard against the practice of caste discrimination, that are also suggested both for private and public sector. All of us know that we talk about reservation in the public sector. And way back in State and Minorities, page number 396, 1979. Please listen the quote. Quote begins, Dr. Ambedkar writes, discrimination against citizens by government officials in public administration or by private employers in factories, under commercial concerns on the grounds of race or creed or social status should be treated as offense. So, keeping this in mind, the insights from the economic theory, both from Western theory and from Dr. Ambedkar's theory of caste system, indicates that market discrimination is a typical case of market failure and bring huge economic inefficiency and adversely affect the prospect of economic growth. So I don't dig on much on that, but if we talk about the policy of the present government, whatever we are seeing the situation, the policy implications of theoretical views call for market intervention to overcome market failure, both for promoting economic growth and ensuring fair access to discriminated groups, not only employment, but also to the other market and non-market sphere. That's what a whole lot of things going on. And when I come to, given this background, when I come to our empirical work, because I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, Professor Krishnaraj told me just now, the moment I reached, there's no PowerPoint presentation, because we, the academician, trained in showing a lot of tables and the evidences, but it's all based on the, whatever the sentences I'm using is the evidence-based. It is based on the recent population, so the recent periodic labor force survey of Government of India. This is the NSS survey. Of course, you know, sir, the National Sample Survey, the periodic labor force of 2021 and 22, based on that. The first thing is, because I don't have a table, the first thing is that I'll give a simple question. So we talk about constitution and national unity. If you look at the disparities in occupation, employment, and wages, first let me talk about occupation. Of course, in the previous session, they said there was a, when I look at the NSS data, by occupation, by the social group, we find that most of this, the better quality occupations, including legislator, senior official, manager, all are occupied by the higher caste. So since higher caste, a high percentage of SC workers are employed in low quality employment like elementary occupation and so on and so forth. And what we economists, we say that it is an occupational segregation. Even in gender, if you make an analysis with the NSS data, then the gender and the female and as well as the scheduled caste, the downtrodden, all of us, that we are segregated in the menial job. So if you look at the occupational distribution, it's heartening to see the present data of the National Sample Survey. So what I say that the wage earnings would be low, which result in higher incidence of poverty in the group. Second is that we would like to discuss about inequality in employment rate. There are two indicators which I would like to talk about to capture the differences and access to employment in urban regular salaried job. So we have calculated the unemployment rate and the probability of access to regular salaried job for the scheduled caste community. So what we find is that the unemployment rate based on current weekly status was 11.1% for scheduled caste compared to 8.69% for higher caste. So the unemployment rate based on both yearly and weekly status is high among the scheduled caste compared to higher caste. Now, when you look at the probability of employment, the access to employment, regular salary employment, if you look at the regular salary job, our overall level is 0.476 probability, but it was very low to the SC worker. It is 0.277 for the SC compared to 0.547 for the HC. It's a probability. So when you come to daily wage, now I talked about the occupation, I talked about employment, unemployment, and the probability of access to employment by the scheduled caste. And now let me come to the wage rate. There's a huge wage disparity between the SC and the higher caste. For example, if you want to tell the figure, the wage rate of the SC workers in the regular salaried combined both public and private. I'm not talking about only public sector. The wage of SC workers was much lower at 148 compared to 216. For the higher caste worker, there is a difference of 67. So whatever may be that, I don't want to read much statistics about it. And there is overall, at an overall level, as well as for SC and HC, the daily wages are much higher in the public sector than in the private sector. So if you look at the public sector and private sector wage differential, there is a huge difference. The public sector wage differential is not that much pronouncing, whereas private sector wage differential is pronouncing very high. That's what the private sector leaders, when they were talking about affirmative action policy, neither they talked about based on the theoretical interpretation or theoretical insights or the empirical insights. That's what today in the book, what we have written and published in Oxford University Press, that we have given the solid evidence based on the recent NSS data for the affirmative action for the private sector. And finally, sir, this is very important. The labor market outcome for SC are quite unfavorable compared to the higher caste that I told. The question is, now, when we talk about occupation, employment, wages, unemployment, and so on and so forth, we know that they are quite unfavorable compared to the SCs are quite, the SC are quite unfavorable compared to the higher caste. Now, the question is, what factor causes inequality in the employment and wages between the scheduled caste and high caste worker? So we have the reason to believe that there is an inter-caste difference in employment and wages between SC and HC, maybe due to difference both in endowments. Suppose most of the people, the economics professor or any researcher sitting here, on an average, the higher caste people are earning 1,000 rupees, on an earning, the scheduled caste people are earning 800 rupees, 200 rupees is a wage differential, and you say this is a labor market discrimination. But what we have done here that the 200 rupees is the gross wage differential. Again, we have decomposed into endowment difference and the discrimination. So I'll just complete it with that. And three evidences, that's all, not more than that. So the book is very big, so 3 evidence. It's a chance for me to even market my book. That's what Professor Thorat told me. And the second thing is that when you say that decomposing the wage differential, what we have seen that 44% of the, 56% is endowment difference. And rest of the 44 is a discrimination, the wage discrimination. 56 endowment difference, what we call it as, there is a pre-labor market discrimination in the areas like, the non-market areas like education, health, nutrition, and everything. In the Western society, they interpret differently, but what we have interpreted in India, it shows the pre-market discrimination. It shows the inequality of opportunity. So that's what we have a higher endowment difference in the regular salaried employment. But when we calculate, decompose the probability of employment between the scheduled caste and the higher caste, you know, the opposite is true. The 74% of the employment discrimination estimated is 74%, and rest is 26% is an is an endowment difference. But again, what we have done is that again we have decomposed the discrimination. It's a very beautiful way we have put. Again, we have decomposed the discrimination into the benefit of being a forward caste in the labor market, the benefit of being a settled caste in the labor market. That's what we call it as overpayment, underpayment, or nepotism in that case. It is a prejudice in the other case. So I don't want to go in depth. This is a lot of econometric exercise we have done. And also we have done occupational discrimination. And occupational discrimination says that the job discrimination pronounces more than wage discrimination, sir. And I'm completing, sir. And finally, this final message, I want to say the important point which no one has attempted in India. The impact of employment discrimination, on impact of employment discrimination on poverty. So I just wanted to only say 2 lines, not more than that, because I want to give the evidence of that. See, I want to say discrimination-induced poverty. What we have done is that we have estimated wage discrimination, we have estimated employment discrimination, and we calculated the total income loss. And then we have found with the discrimination and without discrimination scenario. And what we found is that The figures imply that in terms of 1.9 million cell-caste workers would have been out of poverty if they were not discriminated in employment and wage rate. So what I justify here is that, in one word, I don't want to talk too much of policy implication, we need the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, like what we are seeing in South Africa, and also what kind of affirmative action we are seeing in Malaysia, our neighboring country, why not we? So we can incentivize the private sector to implement affirmative action. So there is no, so this kind of a debate is keeping on going. Of course, it's a high time for the Karnataka government to talk about the reservation for the private sector.
It'll require many more books to take these ideas forward. We have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. If you have a specific question, not suggestions, please questions, and please direct them at the distinguished panelists that you want the answer from. So, yes, please.
Good evening, sir. First of all, thank you all four for this wonderful, insightful thoughts.
Keep the mic closer, please.
Since we are speaking about social and economic justice, I just have a question about a specific community of people, a specific group of people.
No, the question is to which panelist?
No, sir, I think all four can
We can't answer, all four can't answer. Pick the best of us and then ask the question.
I think Beena ma'am can answer this question as well. Ma'am, actually, it's been 75 years. We are in the era of AI, but still manual scavenging is persistent in India. Though government has initiated many policies and initiatives, it didn't impact at ground level. I have read many articles on blogs and many things. I am not getting any clarifications on this gap, like policy and ground level. May I know the reason, ma'am?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a really, important question that we say that we've gone to the moon, but our people are still in the gutters. We are not able to totally eliminate the one thing that is such a shame to this country, which is women and men engaged in manual scavenging or going down the sewers. My friend, the only answer to your question is that there is no political will. There is the money, there are schemes, but every year, like this government has removed the scheme for the education of children of women engaged in manual scavenging. They've totally removed it. This year there's zero allocation. So that there is no political will. That is the only answer to this. If you really want to do it, we can do it within a year. We can stop this practice totally and build something else as an alternative livelihood, but it's just not happening. Thank you.
Okay, anyone has the further question? Any next question?
Yes,
Yeah,
again
please.
to Ms. Beena.
Please do.
So, my fundamental question is about borders.
Who is this question
To
directed
Ms.
at?
Beena.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
she's the popular question answer person.
Yes. So, I'm a student filmmaker and I come from Dubai. And one must observe that Dubai has a lot of Dalit workers, but they are never taken into surveys or any geographical understanding. So what I want to understand is, does our constitution have a ability to secure reservations? So I'm not talking about reservations in the private sector or public sector. I'm talking about reservations across borders to those workers who build stadiums, to those Dalit workers who lose their lives are yet unknown. So what might be the answer to that?
We are not able to solve our own problems, my brother, in this country. I doubt we can go and solve problems in another country. Let's learn to do it here. I think if we can do that here, and really the reservation policy and all the programs and schemes that are there, if we are able to implement that effectively, we can really look at, lowered poverty figures in the next 10 years. But that's not happening. I think we need to sort that out first before we go to another country.
Yeah, Yeah, please.
Yes, good evening, sir. I'm Gautam, research scholar from Presidency University. My question is to sir. You have spoken about organization discriminations. So, when it organizational discriminations in organization, in perspective, yes. When it comes to organization discrimination, as I was very curious about the another panel member, Kancha Ilaya, sir. So when it comes to his buffalo nationalism, the way how you interacted and put on up the informations in a collective manner. So today, one or the other way, the social and economical justices are unable to provide for a citizen based on the spiritual fascism. So in this perspective, so at the current situation, how can the society can get the awareness to avoid or to overcome the discriminations?
So it's a very interesting question. And also
Because, one second, because at the same time, one way it is spiritually dominated, where social equalities have been deprived, and at the same time, when it comes to Beena Madam's perspective, the gender deprivation is also under process, where it starts from the individual perspectives from their self.
okay.
Yeah,
So
get the answer.
let
Get
me-
the answer, please. Yes,
Let, let me answer to your question. You are talking about organization in the sense that I'm talking about the private sector organization. So that's what you mean to say. So what I wanted to say to you as an answer is that I said one thing is that endowment improvement is necessary. Endowment improvement is necessary, but not sufficient. Because even with the equal endowment, similar endowment, the SC have less probability in access to employment. In wage earning due to differential treatment linked with the caste prejudice. For example, insiders, for example, the very great labor economist, Professor Popolo, was saying that endowment difference is a necessary but not a sufficient condition. Because most of the insiders or the particular caste group, they will give the other scheduled caste and other minority group, they don't get insider information. So asymmetric information to these people are very, very vital. So that is the reason most of the time the deprived community and the minority community, they don't get information. And recently, Professor Thorat and myself, we have conducted, that is a study called correspondence study. 400 advertisement, we have sent an application, duplicate application. We have created with a Muslim name and with the SC surname and Brahmin surname applying to the same advertisement. Whatever the probability of calling for the interview itself is an outcome in the research. So we found that 16% out of 4,000 applications, 16% probability from the MNCs and the private sector with the SC surname. For the Muslim surname, we found that only 12% call rate. So this itself says that there is a caste prejudice. If you ask private sector, organization discrimination, they will say that we are not, in the application, we are not asking the caste and religion. But the thing is that when you ask Bajaj company, you will say that 35% of my workers are OBC. How come you're not asking the caste? How come you know that 35? If you look at the recent CAI data, Confederation of Indian Industry data, that shows that 35% of the people are in my Bajaj company, OBC people. How come they know? So the thing is that there is a taste for discrimination. What Professor Becker said, that is still prevailing, which is consonant with Dr. Ambedkar's ideology.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions, please?
I'll just say
Meera ji.
that what Nikhil Bhai said is true, that during the UPA regime, a number of laws were passed. As a result of the people's struggle outside, संसद बाह्य राजनीति से संसद के अंदर भी कुछ होता है. लेकिन implementation of those acts is also not 100%. Now when the alternative economics, alternative development paradigm and alternative politics also is thought about through alternative alliance, does that alliance have evolved? Have they evolved a concrete agenda, time-bound plan, which will give hope and confidence in them by this thing to implement those acts, if not bringing in new acts? Because we see that even in the situation of casteism and communalism, which is really, working as a white ant into the society, reaching out immediately, bringing out the truthful fact-finding report is rarely done even by the opposition parties. So we have to play always the role of an opposition. So how can we expect, and many people are now working with the upcoming elections in mind, with not us, but you more directly into the political, awareness building and various ways and means. So can we not insist on that, and will there be? I think Salman, Khurshid ji can respond to this much better, because you are a part of them.
I've taken off the hat, so my job is only to pass it on to someone. So, Nikhil,
You have the right to conclude.
will respond. The problem, frankly, is that there was a sensitivity in government, in the UPA government. I don't want to praise it as a political thing, but the facts were there was a sensitivity to what you people were demanding on behalf of the people on the ground, who perhaps were not able to voice their own concerns, but they communicated with you, and we accepted that this communication was a genuine one, and what you were representing was the voice of those people, and we responded. I think the problem was that we created the laws, but we didn't create the ideology, and we didn't create the structures that would implement those laws. And partly the trouble was explained to us whenever we asked. It was explained in terms of India's federal structure. We would budget the money, we would put the money down for a scheme, but the manner in which that scheme was to be implemented by state governments, including state governments of the Congress party, was something which left a lot to be desired, And then we kept hoping that this would improve year after year, it would improve. A lot of the economists said to us, in the first year, there isn't an absorbing capacity of the states of more than 5%. Right? So it'll have to be, the budget looked ridiculous, that out of a huge amount, only 5% was being allocated for that particular year. And we were told that this would, over 3 years or 4 years, it would be spread into the entire amount going. But there were major problems of transmitting from the center the intent to the implementation. So the lab to the land kind of transfer was very poor. And we suffered. In some cases, money, including Dalit sub-plan money, was used for other things. And that I think made us pay a very huge cost of faith amongst the people. But it's an experience from which much can be learned.
What I feel is that it's okay that there are some kind of barriers which will have to be, but at least putting down as an agenda. So much time is spent, not wasted, but spent on selecting candidates through the alliance. But selecting an agenda with a time-bound commitment given, not just revdies. Revdies are also to be given.
Now you're asking for state secrets, but
the five things that the Karnataka government has done
candidates hasn't
is
even
also
started.
very valuable.
Selection of candidates has not started. Selection of seats was a very difficult job. Very difficult job, but it's been done. It's been done, and the rest will now follow very quickly. But you're talking about selection of agenda is absolutely paramount. Absolutely paramount. You people should push harder for saying, get the people later, but first get the agenda.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think one thing, and that's something on which the civil society groups that are here or social movement groups that are here, if we can work towards a common minimum program from now, that the alliance or grouping, whatever it is, I think it's much more difficult to work out seat sharing, much more difficult to work out the nature of the alliance, or call it what you may, whether grouping or alliance. But it is possible that everyone will come to one agreement on a common minimum program in which social movements will also be a part of it. Many of us will. And that is something that can go, that on that common minimum program there is a united voice It's practical, it's possible, it should be done in the next few days.
We will carry this. We will carry this back to the alliance.
We will give you tomorrow a copy
And
of
we
it.
can sit together.
Yes,
with
sure,
that with
sure.
them.
Now, our time is up, but I think it's only fair, if you will allow me, that each of the panelists could just sum up in a minute or so, and then we will call it a day. Sir, please. Just like summing up.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as this panel concerned, economic and social change. We talk about economic and social change. I talk from the equality of opportunity. So unless we think of the equality of opportunity, and we may not be able to achieve the kind of, the constitution and the national unity. This is my first thing. And second thing is that as far as the employment discrimination concerned, unless we have as I said in my final statement, that the Employment Equality Commission has to be set up in such a way that if you look at other countries, and also the affirmative action we have to follow, at least from Malaysia. So these are all the things that, we are learning from the best practice, and as well as from what we need is from South Africa, the Equality of Employment Commission. So it is beneficial both for employees and companies. So I don't have to elaborate more. This is beneficial for both for companies as well as for the employees, because if they employ with a diversity, they will get more profit. The example is Walmart.
Thank you. I'd only like to say that Baba Sahib said that without social justice, you cannot achieve economic justice, and vice versa. I think we need to remember that. I just also like to respond to you in hindsight. I thought of a case in New Jersey where they built a big temple and they took Dalit workers from here as bonded laborers. And then they mobilized themselves in the US. It's a very interesting case where they mobilized themselves and they filed, there's a case in the Supreme Court in the US that is going on now. So there are some models that you can follow. Thank you.
So I'm going to say nothing more than that agenda. I think that was a perfect ending. I don't want to say anything more. I do want to make a request because I think it's the end of the session.
Yes,
you can do your thanks. Meanwhile, I would like to request that there is a song on gig workers. We've been fighting for gig workers. There's a song that's just been made by Kunal Kamra, which we want to play here, him and many others, although there's no credit. And if after you give your vote of thanks, we watch it briefly. It's a video song. With all your permission. And those who don't want to can, of course, leave.
I would now like to request Professor Krishna Raj to felicitate our esteemed chair and our distinguished panelists with a small token of appreciation.
So is it loaded, Khush? Almost. So it'll give us an idea also. I mean, it is in a context, but in a much more modern context and a much more modern way. But what these new forms of employment actually mean in terms of dignity and justice, and what is the justice that this new form of employment is. Yeah, it's done, ready, so we can play.
ठेकेदार चाहते हैं कि आपको लगे कि आप स्वतंत्र हो। सोचो, गिग वर्कर अगर स्वतंत्र है तो कैसी स्वतंत्रता है जो वो खुद ही महसूस नहीं कर पा रहा। ठेकेदार बोल रहा है आप स्वतंत्र हो। बेवकूफी की बात है ना, क्योंकि जेल में कोई जेलर रोज रात को चिल्लाता थोड़ी है कि आप जेल में हो। वो तो उन्हें पता है ना, वो तो उन्हें पता है, वो तो उन्हें पता है।
हमें हमारा सब चाहिए, हमें हमारा हक चाहिए, हमें रेटिंग नहीं हक चाहिए, हमें रेटिंग नहीं हक चाहिए। जान सूचना बेचारी चल निकलो मेरे साथ या कुछ कर साथ मेरे, मैं हूँ साथ खड़ा। जान सूचना बेचारी चल निकलो मेरे साथ या कुछ कर साथ मेरे, मैं हूँ साथ खड़ा। ये काम हमारा आम नहीं, ये बात हमारी आम नहीं, तुम कान खोल के सुन लो रे इंसान है हम गुलाम नहीं। ये काम हमारा आम नहीं, ये बात हमारी आम नहीं, तुम कान खोल के सुन लो रे इंसान है हम गुलाम नहीं। सुबह से रात को घिसते हैं हम, ट्रैफिक में ही तो पिसते हैं हम, खाना डिलीवर करते हैं, ओवरनाइट कर थक कर सोते हैं, पर शर्म का तुमको नाम नहीं, तुम देते फिर भी दाम नहीं। कान खोल के सुन लो रे इंसान है हम गुलाम नहीं। तुम किकिंग बोल के लाए थे हमको बढ़िया फंसाए थे, क्या झूठे ड्रीम से दिखाए थे। अब इंश्योरेंस ना मेडिकल ना कोई सुनवाई दे, मिनट का भी आराम नहीं, तुम देते फिर भी दाम नहीं। तुम कान खोल के सुन लो रे इंसान है हम गुलाम नहीं। हार माननी नहीं, आंसुओं को रोकना नहीं, हाथ थामना उसका जो रोते दिखे। पहले तेरे ही हाथों से ये खेत थे बोए, अब ये हाथ वही है बस एक हाथ में है क्लच, और दूसरों में सपनों का सच। सपने सभी ने दिखाया, बोला राइडर तो बन जाएगा तो जिंदगी हो एकदम कड़क। रेटिंग हो जाए जो हाई तो यहाँ पे बन जाए, डिलीवरी पार्टनर कस्टमर तो देवता है, जो टिप तो हाँ छोड़ो पानी भी नहीं पूछता है। बिल्डिंग बोले 7 माले चढ़ के ही जाए, चाहे तेरी जिंदगी में कभी लिफ्ट नहीं लिखा है। अगर कस्टमर कहे 300 फीट नीचे खड़ा, मैनेजर पूछे मुझसे जा पाओगे क्या, आज मैं थक सा गया हूँ, काम पे रुक सा गया हूँ। 17 घंटे ऐप खोला पर घंटा 4 बारी बजा। हमको बिल्डिंग में घुसने को 25 परमिशन लगते हैं, न लिफ्ट अलाउड, सीढ़ी से माले ही चढ़ते हैं। ड्यूटी पर रहते हैं दस्ताने कस के, सर्दी बरसात हो हम नापते ये रास्ते। स्टार्टअप हीरो बनते हो और अपना कोई नाम नहीं, तुम कान खोल के सुन लो रे इंसान है हम गुलाम नहीं। मुझे चाहिए पेंशन ना कि फ्यूचर की टेंशन, मुझे चाहिए सिक्योरिटी, मुझे चाहिए छुट्टी, मुझे चाहिए तेरे नजर इन हाथों पे। अब मैं जग गया हूँ, कब तुम जागोगे। खाना बनाए कोई और, किचन चलाए कोई और, खाना पहुँचाए कोई और। तू बस ऐड बनाता, अमेरिकन कंपनी के कोड चुराता, कोई मर भी आ जाए तो कोई घर नहीं जाता। मैनेजर बताता राइडर रैश चलाता, पार्टनरशिप में कोई मर भी आ जाता तो कोई घर नहीं आता। जिन आंखों में आज पेंसिल पेन या पेंट ब्रश, उनको रास्ता दिखा। जिन आंखों में है उम्मीद और हाथों में किताब, और लैब में हाथ तो बटा। जय भीम जय संविधान, सूचना में जारी चल निकलो मेरे साथ ही कर साथ मेरे, कुछ मैं हूँ साथ खड़ा। जान सूचना में जारी चल निकलो मेरे साथ, आ कुछ कर साथ मेरे, मैं हूँ साथ खड़ा। हमें हमारा सब चाहिए, हमें हमारा हक चाहिए, हमें रेटिंग नहीं हक चाहिए, हमें रेटिंग नहीं हक चाहिए। स्विगी के गुलाम नहीं, जोमेटो के गुलाम नहीं, हम डंजो के गुलाम, अर्बन कंपनी के गुलाम नहीं, उबर फाउंडर ओला फाउंडर के गुलाम नहीं, ब्लिंकिट रैपिडो अमेज़न के गुलाम नहीं, हम फ्लिपकार्ट के गुलाम नहीं, हम मिंत्रा के गुलाम नहीं, हम फार्मेसी बिग बास्केट हम किसी के गुलाम नहीं, पोर्टर और सेप्टो के भी गुलाम नहीं, हम किसी के खिलाफ नहीं पर हम गुलाम नहीं।
ठेकेदार चाहते हैं कि आपको लगे कि आप स्वतंत्र हो। सोचो, गिग वर्कर अगर स्वतंत्र है तो कैसी स्वतंत्रता है जो वो खुद ही महसूस नहीं कर पा रहा। ठेकेदार बोल रहा है आप स्वतंत्र हो, बेवकूफी की बात है ना, क्योंकि जेल में कोई जेलर रोज रात को चिल्लाता थोड़ी है कि आप जेल में हो, वो तो उन्हें पता है ना।
I extend a heartfelt vote of thanks to everyone who has contributed to the success of this conference. Today, as we come to the close of this enriching event, it is important to acknowledge the collective efforts that have made it possible. First and foremost, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to all our distinguished speakers and panelists who have generously shared their insights with us. A special word of thanks goes to the organizing committee, volunteers, and support staff who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to plan, coordinate, and execute every aspect of this conference flawlessly. I hope this evening was enriching and rewarding to all of us. Once again, I place on record our gratitude to all those who have been involved in today's conference. Thank you so much and have a very nice evening.